Welcome to this information webinar about the Middle East public history. We are so glad that you're joining us. I'm sure other people will be joining us as well as we go along. My name is Dr. Akram Khater. I'm a professor of Middle Eastern history and the director of the Khater Center. And today I'm very pleased to be joined by my colleagues, Dr. Nishani Frazier, who is a professor of African American history and the director of the public history program, by my colleague, Dr. Kristen Alff, who's a professor of Middle Eastern history, and by two wonderful graduate students, Callie Doyle and Olivia Tambrini, who are currently here in the program in public history. So before I turn to the agenda, just kind of some, house cleaning kind of thing. First of all, this is a webinar format, which basically means that you get to see us. Unfortunately, much to our regret, we don't get to see you, but it's because of the large numbers. We didn't want to really create a screen that is populated with very tiny squares. And you are muted as well. However, what you can do if you'd like to ask a question, you drop it. There should be a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen with a question mark. So please put your questions there, and we will try to get to them as quickly as possible. And you can put those questions in at any time you want while we're talking. We'll try to deal with them as well. And please keep in mind that even if we leave this, we end the webinar, given the time limitations, and you still have questions, we are available via email, and we are more than happy to also respond to you in that direction. Now, in terms of the agenda, we will take some time. I'll start out by talking briefly about the Khater Center. I'll show you a little video just in the interest of time. It's just about a minute and a half. And then our colleague, Dr. David Embarrass, who's the director of graduate programs, unfortunately is under the weather, so he couldn't join us. So I will take over his role by talking a little bit about who we are as a history department, where we are, for those of you who are not familiar with the Triangle area, very briefly, and a little bit about the application process. And at that point, I will also drop in a couple of tips, two documents that provide you tips about writing application material for this. Then at that point, I will turn the time over to Dr. Frazier, who will take about 10 minutes to talk about the public history program in general. And then after Dr. Frazier, my colleague, Dr. Alff, will talk specifically about this brand new track, if you will, in Middle East public history. And then at that point, we will take questions and answers. And again, Olivia and Callie are here if you have questions specifically about from the perspective of graduate students, what it's like to be here. We are happy to answer questions about the application process, about the program, about funding, and a lot of that stuff, we're more than happy to answer those questions, both in the presentations and afterwards. So without much further ado, I'm going to turn very quickly to the video just to give you an idea about the Khater Center, because it's part of the program here. So let's just do that. I hope you can all see this okay. So thank you so much for watching this. Again, I'm more than happy to talk about the Khater Center, especially as a lab for public history, particularly as it relates to those of you interested in Middle East public history. But for now, I would like to turn to the segment that my colleague David Embarrass would have been taking over and to describe a little bit who we are. So, and I'm completely plagiarizing what he wrote. So this is all, completely without any shame here, reading what he wrote. So, as David describes it, we are a history department, a community of scholars dedicated to students and the public's understanding of the past. Our mission is to foster critical thinking skills for informed global citizenship and to produce innovative and field-defining scholarship for both academic and public audiences. And we prepare our students for the practice and profession of historical research and public history and help them to advance a perspective on the world that conveys full respect for the integrity and dignity of all people. As you can see from a glance at our department website, the history department website, we cover a broad range of areas and topics from ancient history to the present. I know you're primarily interested in the Middle East, but of course we also cover a lot of other stuff. And our faculty, and honestly, this is not just David writing this, I can attest to this as well, are renowned scholars with national and international reputations. Our current faculty have collectively authored over 50 books, published 25 edited collections, written over 350 peer-reviewed articles and essays, and secured more than $16.5 million in grants and fellowships. In the last year alone, history faculty at NC State have delivered over 60 public talks, invited lectures, and keynote addresses. And in keeping with our expertise in public history and our commitment to community-engaged research, we have curated scores of museum exhibitions, digital and documentary history projects, policy papers, commission studies, and other publicly engaged projects. So we are an incredibly active as a community of scholars, and we're also proud to call ourselves innovative teachers. We provide in-depth hands-on training to our graduate and undergraduate students. About 3,000 students take our courses every year, and we help them develop new ways to understand and analyze the past. Our graduate students come from a wide range of backgrounds and are engaged in a very diverse range of traditional history and public history projects, covering subjects from here in North Carolina to other parts of the world. And they use a range of methodologies and their approaches to the past, so we have a lot that we learn from each other as well. I think one of the strengths of our community is that we're all interested in each other's work. We talk a lot amongst ourselves, graduate students and faculty together. And we really do try to learn from each other, enjoy learning from each other. We are located in the Research Triangle area, and I think in many ways it's a fairly unique area because we have three major universities, Duke and Chapel Hill are neighboring universities, which creates a very intense intellectual environment, as well as great opportunities for you to be engaged with faculty and graduate students, as well as a lot of events, trust me, lots of events, cultural and intellectual events throughout the Triangle area. So that, in many ways, creates a really unique space for learning and for doing, if you will, in that regard, in addition to a very rich public life that exists in Raleigh, North Carolina, and increasingly much better food than we used to have when I first arrived in Raleigh. So altogether, a very fortunate place to be in. A little bit about the application process, and again, this is from my colleague David Embarrass, and Dr. Frazier will also be here to answer a lot more the questions in depth because she is heavily involved in this process. Some of you have created accounts maybe and looked at the application process, but I'm going to drop a couple of documents right now into the chat for everyone. And these are two documents that are written, one by a graduate student and one by a colleague, that gives you a better idea, or maybe, yeah, there we go. There we go. That gives you kind of an idea about what we're looking for. And I'm briefly going to talk a little bit about this process that you're all going to be engaged in. There are handbooks, and again, we can give you links to those handbooks so that you can look at them, that provide a lot of resources. The History Department website that Dr. Frazier also just finished redoing the whole thing is really full of information, so please avail yourself of that, it helps you. But in terms of the application, what we require is, in essence, paperwork, So we require transcripts, and if you're applying for an MA program, we need your undergraduates. If you're applying for a PhD program and happen to have an MA, we would require also your MA transcripts. We require GRE scores, I think, thought we didn't do, but maybe. We require 3 letters of recommendation from people who know you and can speak to your potential for success in the graduate program. And those letters of recommendation, it would really be helpful for them to be very specific rather than these kind of general matters. And my colleague Kristen Alff is a specialist in the effective letters, so you can ask her questions about that. We require a personal statement, and one of those things that I dropped in the here both speak to that personal statement, as well as a writing sample, which demonstrates your ability to do graduate work, to show us that you have the potential to do that. So what exactly are we looking for? And again, here I'm quoting my colleague. We're looking for people who are coming with a clear sense of purpose. Not that everybody has to have a totally fixed idea, if you will, but you have to have an understanding of it. So what that means is we are looking for somebody who has engaged history as a field, not as a hobby. Like one little tip, please do not start your personal statement such as "I've always loved history as a child," because we also assume that since you're applying for a graduate program in history, that yes, indeed, you do love history. So what we're really interested in more is your journey, your trajectory, that takes it from an interest to a vocation, to something that engages you intellectually as also as a praxis. Especially if you engage with public history here, we really are curious to know how you understand history in practice as well as in terms of theory. So that's what we're looking for. That personal statement has to speak to your journey and also to tell us why coming to a graduate program here is necessary to continue on that journey and how we can help you in terms of improving and growing in that journey. So that's actually a very critical aspect of things. And so again, where you are, where you came from, where you are, and where you want to go are very important. And so, in many ways, history, of course, is not simply an ability to describe things in the past, although that's important, but it's also to think about their significance, about why things are happening as they are. Especially speaking, in many ways, a lot of our historical projects are taking apart facades and looking under the power structures that underlie, these little facades, social, political, economic facades and structures that create inequalities and injustices in many instances in the world. So we want to see evidence that you can construct an argument with evidence, right? Not opinions, but with evidence. The evidence can come from a variety of sources, as increasingly we are more and more creative in terms of archives. And again, we can address this whole question of archives later. So, you may be applying to other places, and we completely understand that's what you should do. But we also need you to understand that when you apply to NC State graduate program, we need to see evidence that you've engaged with who we are. In other words, not a cookie cutter application, but something that specifically says, why here? Obviously, if you're interested in Middle East public history, why do you want to work with myself and with Kristen? And the great news is we have a third colleague that is joining us in the fall, so basically we have actually outside, Ivy League universities, we have the largest concentration of Middle East historians. And on top of that, the Khater Center, which is very engaged with public history, as these wonderful graduate students who work at the center can attest to, perhaps in the Q&A. So what is it about NC State that is compelling you to come here and what you want to do? So that's what we're looking for. So think about what you are, what you want to do, clarify how you want to go forward, and why coming here is very important. I'm going to stop here because I really want to give time to my colleague, Dr. Frazier and Dr. Alff, to talk more specifically, and time for your Q&A. Thank you so much.
All right, so I will get us started and talk to you a little bit about the public history program. So North Carolina State University has trained heritage professionals, archivists, research scholars, museum specialists. Many of us have a background in heritage preservation, community outreach, oral history, archives, digital humanities, archaeology, museum, right? If it's public history, one of us probably does it. But a lot of our core mission is not just in terms of training and educating students, it's also service to the community. North Carolina State University is what we call a land grant institution, which means that a part of our work is dedicated to expanding intellectual knowledge produced in the university into the community for the enhancement and empowerment of individual communities and organizations. Now, all students who are coming into our program, what we like to see in terms of your application is some demonstrated interest and experience with public history. And that can take the form of individual courses, it can take the form of volunteer activities. There's a variety of ways in which you can demonstrate your engagement of history in the public sphere, and that's what we'd like to see in terms of your application. As part of your coursework, it's helpful to know that what we do is we create spaces or sections that we call concentrations. So there are core classes that you have to take, or courses that all students are required to take. And then there are concentrations. The concentrations vary depending on your area of interest. So we have concentrations in African American history, we have African American public history, digital public history, and of course, now, especially with our third colleague coming in, Middle East public history. It's also important and useful to know that as someone who is coming in into the public history program, some of your courses can also be taken in other departments. So, for example, anthropology has anthropology of the Middle East. Religion has Islamic history to 1798. There's another department that has Egyptian culture through film. So these are opportunities to expand beyond the department to enhance some of your public history knowledge and thinking in other kinds of ways and in other kinds of spaces and through other methodologies. I think it's also important to talk about expectations within the program beyond our core courses and some of the classes that you can take. It's a really, really important aspect of our program to do an internship. Now, with internships, students are expected to take their internships in the summer after their first academic year. However, you are not required to do it only during the summer. Some of you, for example, if you are a candidate in the program, might end up being an intern at the Harala Center. So that's something to take into consideration, that for you all with a concentration in Middle Eastern studies, that you may have a built-in internship that's already in place that we can take as part of the internship requirement. All students are required to produce two projects if you are a master, two choices of a project, not two projects. That seems like a lot. Two choices of a project, right? If you are a master student, you can either select the portfolio as your final project and or the thesis as your final project. And a lot of times that depends on what it is that you intend to do. Many master students go on into the profession, while others decide to take that public history and take it to a next step, going into a PhD program. If you are producing or coming in for your PhD, then obviously the final outcome for the PhD is your dissertation. I think it's helpful to know a couple of other things about our program that might be of help to you. Particularly for our master's students, we have a job placement rate of 87%. What that means is that we have, jokingly, I like to refer to North Carolina State University as the public history mafia, right? We have a whole bunch of colleagues all across the United States in various positions. Obviously, we have former students at North Carolina Museum of History, but we also have students at the New York Public Library, the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library, Yale University Archives, the National Humanities Center, which is right down the street, National Storytelling Association. We run the gambit. And so you can find with us a powerful network of public historians that allows you to be in communication and conversation with your colleagues in the field. The other component, if you are a PhD candidate, it is important to note that you all have a unique requirement with regard to language. Normally, under a dissertation, we do allow students to use GIS as replacement for a language requirement. That will not be the case for you all. So if you are a public historian who is ME concentration, please note that your language requirement will have to be in the language of your particular region or subject of study. We can get into more details about that later, but I want to make sure that we sort of cover that. And if you want, and I'll let Kristen take over after this, but if you want, I can also talk to you about the various communities here in the Triangle, because I think it's important to understand that there's life in the school, right? And we will tire you out, you will work, you will read, you will write. But there's also life, Olivia's laughing, she knows. But there is life outside of the program. And as Professor Khater has explained, we have so many better restaurants than we used to have. Good food across the regional gambit that you would enjoy. A number of coffee houses, grocery stores, masjids. There's a Syrian Christian church in North Raleigh, right? So it's a bevy of community spaces that will allow you to engage beyond the university space. All right, so I will end it right there. I can get into additional details with any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Nishani. Kristen?
Hi, thank you. Um, you can find a lot of the programming on the Hirela Center website or also the history website, the public history website. It's important to, before I get into kind of the nitty-gritty of what is expected, which Nishani already touched upon a little bit, what's happening is that this is a new program, and it's new in that it's a program about public history of the Middle East, which is a little bit uncharted when it comes to, we don't see anything like it in the world. However, it's not really all that experimental because we're building on a very tried and true, very grounded and public history program at NC State with a very strong foundation, as Nishani Frazier just talked about. And so this is our first year, will be our first year of admitting into the public history concentration. And in that sense, I think that there will be this an excitement and enthusiasm for small classes and individual kind of hands-on tailoring, right? And I think that will happen throughout. So that being said, there are a couple core courses that everyone who is in the track or the concentration of Middle East history will take. They will be taking a public history course in modern Middle East public history, as well as a historiography course. And thinking about these courses together, Dr. Khater and I have thought about how we want to make this a rigorous intellectual exercise as well as a public history that we think that there's that this course will be both rigorously preparing future scholars and also practitioners. And so this is something that we are striving to do with, for example, this historiography class, so that it is really very much focused on the Middle East. You will get that kind of training as in other more traditional public or more traditional Middle East history programs. As Nishani said, there is a language requirement. Their advanced reading in Arabic or in a similar language, a language for research and study. And then on top of that, there's 18 credit hours that are that are electives. And we, as Akram said, there is 3 modern Middle East historians in the history department. There will be 3, and even maybe more in terms of maybe a postdoc. And so you will have a lot of opportunities to take multiple classes. But what's also really exciting about the program is that we do have, you will be able to think about the Middle East in a global context, taking courses, graduate courses outside of the Middle East in kind of incorporating different theories, different geographical regions, different ways of thinking and approaching the material from different people in the public history program, but also in the department as a whole. And so I think that that's in the end, there's 21 credit histories and credit hours in public history, 18 credit hours in the Middle East field, and the two core courses in historiography and then public history.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for that. So, yeah, I mean, we already have a question about scholarship, and I will let Dr. Frazier answer that, but also I will supplement that in terms of funding for specifically those of you who would be enrolled in the Middle East Public History track. So, Nishani?
Yes, so we do have scholarships available. That doesn't mean that scholarships are available for everyone that we accept. So we have about 10 to 12 scholarships, what we call a GSSP. The GSSP allows you to serve as a teacher assistant and get a stipend. If it is a master's student, the stipend is around, I believe, 16, 17, Callie, Olivia, maybe you can correct me on that. And then if, for example, some of you may have an opportunity to work within the library because we do have a relationship with the library in their archival collection. So if those of you who have interest in archive education and training, then you would get your training education from that space in terms of a GSSP, and then you would get a stipend also attached. Now, with regard to the sort of number of people, we accept more than the 10 allotted that we have for the fellowship. And part of that has to do with the fact that many students are willing to cover the expenses of their programming, but of their program. But the other thing is that we, on occasion, are able to hire additional teacher assistants. It's not always at the same number, nor is it always consistent, right? But it does give or open up a space for opportunity for funding for a semester. That is normally on a case-by-case basis. So if you are a candidate for the program and you receive a letter from us confirming that you have funding, then that funding covers you for the period of time that you are in this program. If you do not receive funding, but you have been accepted in the program, consider that you'll likely have to utilize student loans, and that on occasion you may have a semester where some of your costs are covered through the GSSP. All right.
So let me jump in and also add, for those of you who are applying for the PhD program, if you are accepted into the PhD program, you will get a stipend. The stipend, I believe, is around $20,000, but that also may shift here or there. So that is the stipend that will cover you for the academic year, which is mid-August all the way through somewhere around mid-May. In the summer, and I'm going to give you like a hypothetical track here. So if you're accepted, let's say, into either the master's or the PhD program within this concentration, you will more likely than not be assigned to the Khater Center for the year. That is part of your stipend. If you receive a stipend, you will get that. In essence, then in the summer, however, we usually open up the possibilities, as Olivia and Callie know, for them to continue to actually full-time employment in the summer, and that's a paid employment, and that will be supplemental. On top of that, for those of you who are again in this track, we understand that a lot of your research will be in the Middle East. We understand that there are some of you who need to advance your language skills, and we have, funding specifically for those purposes that will come through the Khater Center to support those two elements. So in essence, if you think about it, there's a variety of ways in which we can also enhance the funding. Obviously, if you're an international student, you cannot apply for student loans. That is only for US citizens. But again, if it's a PhD program, you will get a stipend. You're guaranteed stipend. If you're an MA program, we will work very hard to get one for you, and we can work with that in a variety of ways. So we can, again, this is not guaranteed, but we work very hard to provide funding as well. So I hope that answers that question, Dina. If you have any other question, please let me know. All right.
also
Yeah,
add
go ahead.
to your point about additional funding? We do have additional funding through not related to scholarships, but for research. So if you're a PhD candidate and you have to, say, conduct research somewhere in Lebanon, Egypt, any of those locations, then you can apply to two different funds. There we have a graduate funds that's direct from the department, and you can apply for research assistance, travel assistance, for conferences, additional funds for other scholarly activities. And then we also have specific for public history, what we call the Sorrel funds. And that's for, again, research, any kind of scholarly activities, including attending conferences and giving presentations.
Thank you, Nishani. All right, so Thomas was asking specifically about a project that he has in mind and looking at people who came from the Middle East to the United States and doing some ethnographic work. Uh, so, Thomas, the topic that you're suggesting, of course, in terms of migration mobility, would be very interesting. But you have to keep in mind also that when we are looking at a public history degree, we're looking at how do you take this kind of research, and you make it public facing. In other words, how do you engage the public in a project like that? And to give you an idea, for example, many of our students, I mean, Callie and Olivia right now are working on a project at the Khater Center that is going to be hopefully published by September of 2026, and it's specifically public facing. It engages digital media, it engages digital humanities, data visualization, with a lot of serious research that's done we do as historians. So again, when you're thinking about your project and applying for it, the question is, how do you want to do this work? And as Kristen said very well, we want you to be very rigorously trained as a historian. We don't see daylight between traditional history and public history, but we also want you to think, okay, how do you then turn around and make this accessible? So keep that in mind when you apply in that regard. But of course, the project you suggested is fine. And Nishani, I think you're going to answer the next one.
Yes, I accidentally hit the wrong button, but no, there is no age limit in terms of the master's program. The other thing is that one of the key elements of what makes public history so unique is that a lot of the work that we do don't look like history in the traditional form. So any kind of sort of dissertation product that is sort of incorporating that heavy research that Akram talked about, along with the policy, right? If you were to actually construct a legislative policy that would be something you'd like to see put through either by state, federal, that would be some element that we could incorporate into one of the chapters of your dissertation, right? So within the context of public history, there's a little bit of flexibility in terms of what your dissertation looks like. That is always going to be determined by your advisor. So let me be very clear about that. So the degree of which your dissertation will deal with one aspect of public history or other will be made in conjunction with your advisor. Obviously, oral history is one of those things that we incorporate, but I want you to think about oral history beyond methodology, right? Because there's a distinction between oral history as methodology and then its usage for public engagement. So that's distinctive.
So I also want to add that basically when you're coming into this concentration in Middle East history, you're going to be working with Kristen or myself or both. We may very well both, be working with you. And so we will also be helping advise and direct you. And one of the things that I also want to emphasize that we are working very hard, as Kristen said, this is a brand new concentration, and so it's going to be growing. Like we just found out that somebody gave us a commitment for funding for graduate students for 5 years. So I mean, that was just this morning I found out. So this is a growing thing. But what is also important is we are thinking about the training for the next generation of Middle East historians in two ways. One, and again, as Kristen said, if you go around the United States and UK, the United Kingdom, you'll find that there are a lot of good, excellent PhD programs in public history. Kristen and I are products of those. But they are very traditional in the sense that they are training you to go to academia. We see this as a new program that trains you, if you want to go into academia, of course, you should be able to, but also, as Nishani was alluding to go into all sorts of possibilities, to direct, to basically be a museum director, to run an archive, to become a policy advisor, to anything in that regard. So the alt academia, or the alternative to academia track, is very important to us. But the second thing is, we also think that this is a new generation of Middle East historian, in the sense that we want you to be engaged in what's going on the ground in the Middle East. So we are working very hard to also develop internships in the region. So if we want to actually, some of you may be from the region, some of you may have links to the region, others may not have ever been there. But we not only are we imagining that you would have internship here or at the Arab American National Museum, for example, but also possibly at the Khater National Library, or some organizations in Egypt or in Lebanon or in Tunisia or in Palestine. So we are really understanding our role as helping you navigate and gain access to all these elements, because we see this cohort that we graduate as really the leaders of the next phase, the next generation leadership of cultural institutions and public history praxis in the region. Any other questions we have? Or I don't know, Callie or Olivia, if you would like to jump in, please. If you want to talk a little bit about your experiences, that would be fine too, since we have a little bit of time.
Yeah, to your point about the public-facing nature of the Hyrella Center, that's something that I've really valued in my experience there. I've been there since January, so gosh, a year. And I've worked on so many different types of projects, um, creating a podcast, using oral histories, archival processing, image processing, and currently, as Akram mentioned, a spatial history project that hopefully will be out later this year or next year. But yeah, just the variety of types of work that the Hyrella Center does, spatial history, digital humanities, oral history, has been such a joy and interesting and unique experience to be a part of.
Thank you, Callie. I think there's a question here that maybe, Nishani, you would like to answer. It's about whether the person needs to have an MA to apply for a PhD.
So you don't have to have an MA to apply for the PhD. However, I'm going to be very frank here. We tend to rank those who already have an MA higher in the PhD applicant pool. So you are not inhibited, but we do want to see very high level demonstration of your ability to transition from a BA to straight to an MA PhD program. And part of that has to do with the fact that language is such a key part of this particular concentration. If we're not seeing that demonstration of high level of language ability combined with high level of skills in research and writing, that can inhibit your access to a PhD program. So we like to tell people, first try the MA program, and then and many of the students can already tell you, you can then apply for the PhD program at NCSU, and even better because you will have had an opportunity to work with faculty here. That being said, will we block you? No, but as I tell some of the students who want to go from BA to MA PhD, you have got to blow us out of the water, right? Because we really want to see someone who is prepared for a dissertation level trajectory. So are you barred? Absolutely not. But make sure that you're in that sort of high level skill status. Okay. Oh, and Olivia, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was just gonna reiterate what Callie was saying. I'm a first year, so I'm just finishing up my first semester in the MA program, and already by working with the Khairella Center and with other opportunities across campus, I've already been kind of, thrust into the world of public history and gaining a lot of great experience already. So I can't speak to that anymore. Like it's been an incredible opportunity, and there's a lot of great connections, and there's also a lot of room to explore because you come in with certain ideas of what you want to pursue, and then another opportunity comes up. So there's a lot of cool opportunities to explore and kind of expand and all of these different things.
Can I say something?
Please, of course.
This what is it just I've been reminded that it's maybe unusual to have such a to seek a humanities degree in a what is often thought about as a STEM school. And I was reminded by Callie because talking about podcasts is that we have within the university all of this rich rich resources in computer science, in we have a lot of people in the department working on technology. This is an engineering school. We have podcast booths. We have a maker's room. That students can use for free, right? So there is a lot of innovation going on at this university, and a lot of a combination of kind of technical knowledge and humanities. And the university itself is very much on board or supportive and encouraging of this blending. And so there is a lot of resources. There are a lot of resources out there for very unconventional thinking or unconventional products, that you wouldn't get in a traditional program. I know that I have personally an MA student that went to the computer science and said, teach me how to do this coding, and ended up with this amazing project as a result. And so I think that there's that there. This university lends itself to that kind of those kind of projects and innovation.
They do. Listen, and I'm going to toot the horns of my colleagues, just embarrass them a little bit. I have never been, I'm always privileged and honored to be around colleagues like Nishani, like Kristen, who are at the top of their field, at the same time, no ego. They actually will embrace you. They will embrace you, not physically because we don't do that, but they will embrace you and guide you and mentor you in ways that I have not seen. And I'll tell you one quick thing about from my own personal life. When my youngest daughter wanted to become a historian, I told her, come to NC State and do your undergraduate here, because this is where you will be mentored in ways that, she was accepted to other places. She went on to Yale. Now she's a professor at Berkeley of African American history. And it's all because she was mentored closely. I can tell you that, for example, Kristen is the leading scholar. I cannot overemphasize how brilliant she is, and she has done, her new book coming out is groundbreaking and will change the field. Nishani has had a long and storied career in public history and public advocacy and justice work. This is the kind of stuff that you will be involved with. And again, before I turn on the time for the graduate students and then answer the last question, I also want to emphasize that, for example, at the Khater Center, what Kristen talked about, STEM and humanities, science, technology, engineering, we have been working for the last 5 years extensively with AI, technology, and Arabic. And I don't want to go into too much details because I don't want to take time. But we are always there, and this is one of the advantages of being here, is that you come up with all sorts of new projects that you haven't even imagined, and they are really world-shaping projects. And I'm not saying this in kind of some sort of, tooting our horns. It's just a reality. We're doing things that really are transformative in many ways, and I think we would love for you to be part of it. And but most importantly, we will guide you to become the best person you can be, the best historian you can be. And that is what we really dedicate ourselves to. I'm going to turn the time over to Callie and Olivia to answer the questions about the application from an anonymous attendee.
Yeah, I can totally jump in here. So I don't remember the exact timeline and dates and everything, but from what I remember from the MA perspective, writing a personal statement, a statement of purpose, something along those lines, and then I don't believe I had to. The GRE was not required because I didn't take that, but maybe that's changed since then. But just talking about your interests and different research that you've done and different experience that you've had. Sometimes it's kind of hard to brag about yourself, but that's essentially what you kind of have to do with these applications. And I think that if you have any professionals in your life, history professionals, like my undergrad advisor was very instrumental in helping me with these applications. or if you have somebody that you can consult for that, like that's definitely very very helpful to kind of have that expertise. But Callie, I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add. I was doing this like a year ago, so it all kinds of blends together, but
Yeah, same here. I think that to Akram's earlier point about making clear how you specifically fit into the NC State mission and NC State community is really helpful, showing how certain classes, certain professors you could work with during your time here, certain projects that kind of coincide with those professors' missions. That is an interesting point that I kind of seized. And to Dr. Frazier's point, also proposing an interest in the community directly as well is really important.
Uh, Nishani?
Yeah, I was just going to add, just on the committee, and I read these applications all the time. Here are the things that stand out that might be helpful for you. One, your personal statement should be, as Olivia says, right, an explanation of what makes you so great, right, so fantastic. Olivia knows that I'm being very coy because usually I use the term sexy. Why are you sexy, right? Why should you come to this program? What is the appeal that you are bringing to us? So, what do I mean when I say what makes you nice? What we want to do is really see your intellectual development. What are the courses, the ideas, the activities that you participated in that allowed you to create a sense of yourself as a historian, a public historian in this particular subject area, and or utilizing particular methodologies of archives, libraries, things like that. What we also want to see is who do you want to work with within the program? This helps us to understand who we can connect you with. And this is where Professor Khater is right on the money. We mentor. So we can't mentor you if we don't know who you want to work with. Sometimes this is also about availability. Some of our scholars have a grant, they're away for a semester. And so it's important to make sure that we're linking you with who's available, who's the perfect person for you. The other thing is that we want to see a demonstration of a forward level thinking of what you want to do, right? With your work, with your research. You come in, as Olivia says, and you may have one idea and that can change. That is not a problem. But we do want to have a sense of what do you think you might want to do, right? So we can sort of hone in on a broader subject area. Now, I've had many students who've come in and wanted to do one subject and then they drastically changed to the other. And that's fine. But allowing us to situate you then allows you to then connect to classes, faculty members, and things like that. So I just want to make sure that you all had a clear sense of what it is that we're looking for.
Can I speak to the
Of course, yeah.
So Hazem is, I think, has asked a question about the recommendation letters, which kind of goes along with this, and that is that having kind of the whole package is really important. Having your kind of proposed area of research, how that will fit in with the NC State community and the history department and the mentor that you want to work with, but also how has your experiences in the past shaped you to be prepared to do this particular area of research. And that's where the letters of recommendation are really important. As Akram said, not really generic. We can read a lot of letters of recommendation that said like, this person's a great person and he's nice and he is a hard worker. But that really says nothing when we have, multiple applications that say the same exact thing. And so I would encourage you to ask your recommenders to talk about certain things. And I would encourage you to make a list of those things to really kind of think out what is it that you want to present? How do you want to present yourself holistically? How do you want to talk about the different aspects of your project or your future research or your future goals? And how do these letters of recommendation fit into that? Having at least one letter of recommendation from especially for a PhD, from an academic, from academia is really important as well, because we do need to know, have kind of testimony that you do the work and that you are, PhD level kind of that you're prepared for PhD level work, and a letter of recommendation, if not one, multiple, is really important for that.
Thank you, Kristen. Thomas, I'll take the question because it pertains. Excuse me, I apologize. So, in terms of partnership, both Kristen and I have extensive relationships with various organizations in Lebanon and in Egypt, and our incoming faculty member also has connections there. In terms of relationships with Lebanese universities, absolutely yes. I mean, we have relationships with them as well as we continue to develop relationships with organizations on the grounds, such as in Lebanon, an organization called Our colleague who will be coming in the fall has worked closely with Shubra Archive, which is a fantastic public history, public-facing project going on. We are continuing developing these things, and we expect only that they will develop. So both Chris and I have worked with people in Kaslik, the Holy Spirit University in Kaslik. So I know we have a working relationship with them. In fact, they were partly our partners in the AI project. So yes, in answer to your questions, we have both universities as well as organizations. The mechanisms, but I also need to add that, as you probably can imagine, a lot of universities, as well as organizations in the Middle East, just don't have a lot of funding. And so we will work, in other words, if they are going to bring somebody in to be an intern, they very likely will not have the money for that. So we will work hard to provide funding because, as you know, we do not want people to labor without remuneration. That is not acceptable. No free things here. People should be awarded, a certain amount of money for their work. So we will work with you to provide funding, so you can take that funding along with you, but still get the experience of working with the organization on the ground. That is very important to us, which is why I'm in constant fundraising mode. So anyway, happy to provide more details if you want at that point. Any other questions? We've only got about 7 more minutes left, so this is a good opportunity if you have any questions about any aspects of this before we all say goodbye. And if not, then we can say goodbye earlier too.
I will add just an addendum to what Kristen just shared about demonstration in your recommendation letters. What we also want to see in your personal statement is how that technology, that tech experience can be put to work in public history. So there are many of us who are currently moving into digital humanities with AI work, myself with large language models. So there's absolutely space to be interdisciplinary, but the noun is interdisciplinary. We need to see that history in there somewhere. So make sure you make the case for not just why those particular recommenders might be present to recommend you, but why you and your experience then relates to this particular department.
Thank you so much. Oh, there's, I think, one more question. Oh, all right. Well, thank you, Nanar. We really appreciate you joining us. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And remember, as I said at the beginning, if you have any questions for any of us, please don't hesitate. You can find our emails on the university, on the department website, or the university directory. Please do not hesitate to send us your question. The application deadline is January 15th. So keep that in mind. Especially for those of you who are applying to the MA program and want to be considered for funding, you have to apply the January 15th. We have later applications, but you will not be considered for funding after that. And again, for those of you who are coming into this track, we will work very hard to make sure that you are provided with funding, MA level or at the PhD level. At the PhD, you're guaranteed. So again, deadline January 15th. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. We're here. Thank you so much for joining us. We wish you a wonderful day, and we look forward to receiving your applications. Bye.